Issues show. Right, we're on air. Hello. Welcome to a very special Vielle Google Hangout. Leave my chair up. Oh, got to turn the sound off here. To a very special Vielle Google Hangout. We have Bill Bexson with us today, and this is the first Google Hangout without my headset and with the guest sitting next to me. So it's very special. So let me just go through a couple of things. Remember, Vielle's Google Hangouts are CPD accredited. So during the recording, we're going to ask you a question. And if you want a CPD certificate, we want to make sure that you actually were listening. Send us an email with the answer and you get your certificate. Right. The next thing is remember that you can sign up on our YouTube channel and receive automatic notifications of everything that every time we do an alert, every time we have a new Hangout occurring, you'll get a notification. We also have podcasts, so if you are having trouble sleeping at night, you just have to listen to a Vielle podcast, and that should probably help you. So you can get us on a podcast, and you can receive on-screen notifications. Go to viellesales.com. Bottom left, you'll see a little red button. Press the button, and you get alerts of everything we're doing there and then. So that's the intros. Right. Let's say who's around today. Right, Neil Singer, that's me. We have our very special guest, Bill, sitting next to me, I'll introduce in a moment. We have Dale Henry, who's going to wave.
Hi, everyone.
We have our Scottish office, Graham Waddell.
Afternoon.
Okay, and we have a special young man guesting today, Charlie Younger, who can shout, but he's not on screen. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is let's run through what's been going on in the market. I'm going to hand over to Mr. Henry, and we're going to run through some sales. So, Dale.
Hello. Okay, can you hear me okay? Hi, everyone. Okay, so just in terms of activity at Vielle, glad to say we've been doing a few deals of late. In terms of some sales we've got across the line recently, we've just recently sold this office investment up in Sunderland, which is let to Nissan and Avant Homes on relatively short leases. Key to this one, it was right next to the new Northern Spire Bridge. We sold this for 1.3 million, 9%. We've also just recently sold a shop down in Trowbridge, let to let to Co-op Funeral Care. We went from marketing to an exchange of contracts in only 8 days on this one. We had more than several parties interested and ended up with someone exchanging within a couple of days via click to purchase. And that went for 6%, which I think shows the, for these sort of small lot sizes, there's continuing strength for income in the from private investors in the market at the moment. And we've got a number of new properties we've brought to the market. You can see on screen. If I just very briefly run through them, we have got a shop, a Sainsbury's supermarket down in Poole, let till 2023. We're quoting 1.3 million, 6%. We have got a very nice little shop down in Taymouth in Devon, let to Subway, as you can see. Small, attractive lot size. We're quoting 7%, so attractive yield on this one. Prime pitch. What else we got? We are marketing a London retail investment let to Cancer Research, a great covenant in West Ealing, right next to the new Crossrail station. Let till 2024. Again, small, attractive lot size, 440,000, 5% quote on this one. What else we got? We have got a high yielding retail warehouse and supermarket investment up in Peterlee, which is let to Lidl and Pound Stretcher. Big site, low site cover, only 20% site cover. We're quoting just over £2 million. Nice yield of 10%. We are literally today just about to launch a lovely shop in York led to a really great covenant, trading as Millie's Cookies, about a £400 million company. They've been in occupation since the 80s, right in the heart of the city centre. We're going out at 575,000, which is 5.5%. And what else? We've got a few Scottish sales, which Graham may want to run through in a minute. And we have got some new sales coming up. Some shops down in Portsmouth, which we're just working on at the moment, which will be, again, right in the centre, high yielding. Early next week, we'll be launching a very, very nice restaurant investment in Beaconsfield with about 18.5 years unexpired to a national restaurant chain. And we've got a redevelopment opportunity in Stoke Newington, which will also should be launching next week. So keep a close eye out, and we'll be sending out notifications on those sales during the course of next week.
Great, thanks, Dale. Okay, so you can see lots to sell. If you've got some money to park, you know where to come. We are busy selling. The market is still good at singleviellesales.com. How is it in Scotland? Graham, Doug, you there?
Yeah, I just had to unmute my microphone. You know, that's the technology. It's good. We've got, as I've flitted through your screen, we've got a lovely wee block in Fraserburgh, town in the north of Scotland, let to Card Factory and Co. So we brought that out just last week, and there's good interest. Brought out a soft play area in Airdrie, which really good interest over the last couple of days, and we've got a couple of things we're bringing out next week. Where things are properly priced, then we definitely have interest. So watch this space, because there's 2 or 3 things. There's an interesting industrial that we're going to be bringing out next week, which will be of interest to investors and developers. It's got quite a few angles to it, so we'll be launching that next week as well.
Okay, great, good. Right, let's get Bill. Bill?
Yeah, I'm here.
Who are you?
Well, Neil, thanks a lot. First of all, great to be here with you. See all this wonderful technology that you've got at work. A little bit like the motor industry, where we've got a lot of changes and new technology coming in that makes it quite an exciting time for us all. You asked me to make an introduction. We set up APC in 2005. We're a specialist property provider. We're focused purely on the franchised motor market, and our clients are motor manufacturers, car dealer groups, and also a large number of investors, together with property companies. And the work we do, as you'd expect, is the full range of property consultancy business, agency, professional work, valuation, sales and lettings, and investment advice, together with planning and rent reviews. Since we've been established over the last 5 years, we've done about £350 million worth of investment sales.
Can everyone can hear you? Okay, come a bit closer.
We've done about, sorry, thank you, Neil. We've done about 350 million of investment sales over the last 5 years, and actually over 10 years we've done about 525 million. Our 10-year average market share in the investment market is about 30%, and so far this year,
of the whole investment market,
of the whole car dealership.
Oh, the car dealership market.
And
I thought you looked like you had a nice watch on.
And we have done about £45 million worth of sales so far this year, which, to be precise, is 42% of the car dealership market, and that includes, Neil, the sale of the Liverpool Fiat dealership that we did together.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay, so it's an interesting time in the economy, let alone the property business, and I think it's be interesting to talk about what is going on in the car market, because the car market is going through some change, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
So, do you want to talk about the cyclical and the structural changes? What's going on in the industry?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's really important to distinguish between the cyclical changes, which, for example, is sale of new cars, and the structural changes, which is, for example, the introduction of electric vehicles, autonomous driving, semi-autonomous driving, and car sharing, all of which are in the news. And we get a lot of questions, particularly from investor clients, about this new technology. And because we're dealing on a daily basis with dealers and manufacturers, we get their feedback, and we can provide that translation service through to our property industry clients. So we do spend a lot of time, and we produce reports on, on that sort of thing. But the important thing, and perhaps we might look at the slide here, might be an idea, is if we can just visualize for people what we mean by distinguishing between the cyclical and the structural. So, as I mentioned, new car sales and consumer confidence matters are really ones of a cyclical nature, but the structural ones are, as I've described here, the electric vehicles, the autonomous driving, and the subscription services. And these are ultimately going to have a much more far-reaching impact than the cyclical new car sales. So what we should do when looking at the motor industry is put the cyclical to one side and look at these structural changes.
Yeah, because you would imagine, I mean, there's a lot of talk. If you read the press, car sales are down, and the industry appears to be suffering. And it's interesting, I think, that people automatically think that the whole industry is changing because of electric vehicles and car sharing, etc., which I think we can go into in a moment, which would be interesting. But actually, you would have thought, therefore, that you don't need car showrooms, but actually, it's quite the converse, isn't it? So it's interesting to talk about the nature of where the industry is going. I mean, let's first of all think, what do you think Brexit is doing to the car market? Because I'm interested. What I'd like to try and do is talk about the car market and then how it fits in with our property side.
Yeah, okay. I mean, Brexit is important consideration, but there are other regulatory changes that are actually more important for the motor industry. But if I just deal with your question about Brexit, first of all, clearly what the motor manufacturers in particular are concerned about is tariffs and how that might affect them, and difficulty in transporting goods, i.e. border controls.
Yeah.
Because if you were to take a typical car made in Europe, maybe if it's made in Britain, 40 to 60% of its supplier parts will be made in Europe. So if the car's made in Britain, it's got to have engines, gear transmissions, etc., brought into this country. And again, this country, for example, Ford make engines in this country, but they don't make cars. So the engines have got to be exported. So it's important for the motor manufacturers that there isn't either an interruption to the conveying of the parts that go into cars, because they don't want to have to stop the production line. And it's also important that there aren't tariffs that would otherwise upset the balance of the cost implications. Mm. However, the real changes are happening, rather a little bit like distinguishing between cyclical and structural. The real changes that are happening are in regulations relating to emissions. And that's what's been causing the problems with regard to the decline in September of 20% in car sales. It's a supply side problem because the manufacturers haven't been able to get their current models or their new replacement models through the regulatory process in time. So that, for example, Volkswagen imported about 60% less vehicles into the UK in September across their group because they didn't have them approved for sale under the new regulations. Petrol, diesel, even alternatively fueled vehicles. So what's happened now is, whereas before a car to be approved would go through a laboratory test, now the new regulations known as real world emissions tests literally require the vehicles to be driven on the road and tested. But it also has to be every derivative. So if it's got a sunroof and it hasn't got a sunroof, if it's got 18-inch wheels or 17-inch wheels, each of those have to be tested. Okay. And the motor industry haven't been able to transform quick enough. So what you've got is a supply side shortage evolving at the moment, until the new product arrives, whereupon there will be a cyclical boom.
So because people are very concerned about Brexit, it's easy to blame Brexit for the drop in car sales, but that's just part of it.
Yeah, that is exactly the point. It is part of it.
Okay.
I mean, the more cynical might suggest that the major motor manufacturers are wanting to use this to make a point about Brexit, but lying underneath it is regulatory change.
Because I've heard on the news that some of these manufacturers are saying that, tell me if you'll know the answer. They don't hold a lot of stock for parts in the UK. Is that right? They hold it. They work. Their models are that they need a part. They pull it in from Germany. They pull it in from Europe.
Yeah, I'm not a logistics expert, but each manufacturer will have a centralized parts distribution center. I mean, Ford's in Daventry, Nissan's is in Lutterworth, for example, and they distribute on 24-hour notice to their dealers overnight. So in turn, the probability is that they are receiving products from all over Europe in time to be able to do the 24-hour distribution to their own network.
Okay. So what I'd like to do, if I may, I'd like to explain to everyone all the new, what the new items in the market which have come around in the last few years, and then we sort of gradually bring it into the property side. So should we talk about electric vehicles and the alternative fueled vehicles and autonomous driving?
Yeah,
I think those. I don't know if one of your slides is appropriate.
Let's do that. I mean, the big change is powertrain, which is this move towards electric and alternatively fueled vehicles, and a decline in diesel as a fuel. So what we've got here is a slide that is showing how cars are not facing extinction. They're very much the centre of providing mobility, but the way in which the powertrain of the car is changing towards electric and alternatively fueled, and the ownership model is changing towards shared driving subscription services, and the usage is changing towards autonomous, more likely semi-autonomous. So you will see a situation in years to come with smart motorways where the motorways are influencing the driving of the vehicle. So the car is talking to the road, smart motorways.
Yeah.
But clearly, and in time, cars that can't do that may not be allowed to use motorways.
Yeah, interesting. So, and what's the rise of the electric car? And because if I can first of all deal with that, because I've got a couple of questions about what's happening. Shall I show people this one? This is probably quite useful, isn't it?
Yeah, this slide, what we've tried to do is government policy is that by the year 2040, all new cars sold will be either electric or alternatively fueled vehicles. And this is a headline announcement. And I think a number of people haven't looked behind that headline announcement to realise what it means. So what we've tried to do is, and working with leading industry analysts, is try and work out what it means and where the point of inflection is, i.e. where alternatively fueled vehicle car sales overtake conventionally fueled car sales.
Okay, so on your graph, that is for people who can't read it, that is going to be about it's the green one, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the solid green line and the solid black line.
So it's about 2040. Okay, there's not.
So what you're looking at is in about 2039 on that graph, 100% of car sales will be alternatively fueled, but at that point, 50% of vehicles on the road will still be petrol or diesel. So the point for the car dealership market is, for the foreseeable future, there are still going to be petrol and diesel cars sold and serviced alongside the introduction of the new alternatively fueled vehicles. And there may be other, incidentally, fuel sources, hydrogen, for example. It may not necessarily always be electric.
Yeah, Damien has mentioned, I was asked about hydrogen cars, actually. So the nature of the car is changing, but if we've all got electric cars, what's the impact on the dealership?
Well, the impact on the dealership is that electric cars produces a replacement and a new sales product. And cars are like other products, think of televisions perhaps, where as new development comes out, that's what people want. So as the new cars evolve, and it's important to immediately link into this connectivity. So a bit like, very much like your own business, what will happen is that cars are more connected. So the cars become very much more aligned to the iPhone type concept, and people are more linked in, to that. So customers today want more connectivity through their cars.
Shall I show people this slide?
Yeah, this is a slide that's linked to Ford and is to do not just with connectivity, but this is the other aspect, which is vehicle sharing or subscription services. So essentially, Ford and every other manufacturer is developing a system where you'll not only own a car from them, but you'll have a car and mobility service provided as well. So that what that means is that whereas you have Uber at the moment, and probably to continue, Ford will also have a driver service. So you may own a Ford, but you may decide, because you're going to go out, that you don't want to drive, and Ford will then put you in touch with essentially a Ford taxi that will arrive, take you to where you're going. And that has huge implications. For example, it's likely that for property, it's likely that town centres, for example, may not then need so much car parking, because there'll be much more in the way of taxi subscription service delivery of vehicles. So it takes away drinking and driving considerations, for example.
So what was interesting, I was at Berkeley Homes a couple of months ago, and they've got a huge scheme out in East London around Aldgate, and they've got no car parking. And I said to them, I cannot get my head around the fact that people are paying, £600,000 for a flat without car parking. And they said, yeah, but you don't realise that young people don't want a car. And actually, so I thought it would have a terrible impact upon the car industry. But when you and I were talking about it, I mean, you can expand upon it for people watching, is you were saying, well, that the point is that people are, because they're changing their habits, they'll be with driverless cars and with Uber drivers and with shared vehicles, there still is a huge demand for cars going forward. It's just the nature of where the demand comes from is different.
Yeah, I think
so.
That's
I think, yeah. So it's worth explaining that.
So what will happen, particularly in London, is a classic example in urban areas where the cost of car ownership and car usage, for example, congestion charge, etc., and parking it and the considerations of that. There are going to be more car clubs. So companies, I imagine, like Berkeley Homes, will start to offer concierge services with the flat that are linked to car clubs that provide the person with, like in Manhattan, a taxi service that will take them out to the restaurants or in the shop. Remember, the shopping can be home delivered. But even when they want to go to Harrods or Selfridges or Covent Garden or the extra shopping experience, they will be a member of the car club. And even in our world, I've met a retail agent. A lady lives in Clapham. She doesn't have a car. She just simply walks around the corner to her enterprise car club parking space, and for £45, £50 a whole weekend, she can then take that car, drive down to her parents
It's amazing. And you just pick it up.
Yeah. But I think that the subscription service will sit alongside ownership. So it may well be that we'll find that people have cars, but they don't park them in London. They're parked somewhere else.
Tell me, how long do you think the driverless cars will start to have an impact?
Well, driverless cars is going to be a matter of government regulation and the need to deal with the safety and the responsibility aspects. I think more realistic in the short to medium term is more movement towards autonomy. So at the moment, the ability to design and deliver an autonomous car is perfectly feasible. And all of the cars that are delivered, to my knowledge, that are autonomous are hands-on. So in other words, you have to have a hand on the steering wheel. And if after, say, 3 seconds, it's identified that you're not got a hand on the steering wheel, you're not therefore in control of the car, you're not therefore responsible for the car will stop or will come to a stop. So at the moment, the prospect of moving towards full autonomy is quite challenging because of the regulatory requirements. On the other hand, in theory, the movement towards autonomous cars will remove human error and will make driving more safe, which means that roads can be more intensively used and probably means there'll be more cars on the road and more cars generally.
So it's interesting, isn't it? So whilst people's automatic reaction to the changing world is that actually there won't be as many car dealerships needed, actually that's not the case at all.
No, you asked about electric cars. So we've shown a graph, and it shows that even in 23 years' time, half of the 37 million cars on the road currently, assuming it's flat, whereas many people think it'll be 2% per annum growth in cars, those cars have all got to be serviced and sold alongside all of the new vehicles. And for example, an electric car can't be serviced on the same ramp as a combustion engine car. The ramps apparently have to be wider. Dealing with a battery and a combustion engine is completely different. And also the safety risks are very different, because clearly in a combustion engine, you've got fuel and fire risk. With an electric car, you've got electrification risk. So it requires completely new training. So the likelihood is that, for example, workshops might have to get bigger whilst they deal with the transition from electric to electric.
And have you seen the dealers starting to change their occupational requirements in relation to all this, or is it still a bit slow? Is it slowly coming in?
I think there are two schools of thought. There are some dealers that see that the palace, the theatre presentation of the new product is important, and we're seeing this. For example, there's what will be the most impressive Jaguar Land Rover dealership in Europe is currently being built in Staples Corner, and it's about 6 stories high and will be an absolute palace to that Jaguar Land Rover product. So would fit the American definition of a category killer. On the other hand, you're seeing other dealers and manufacturers looking at more modest representation. So from a property perspective at the moment, the dealers and the manufacturers are evolving their new model, physical model for the future. I don't think they necessarily see that there's a one-size-fits-all solution. So we might see some elements of disaggregation, splitting up of operations. However, the one great thing for property is in the UK, it's quite expensive to source sites and to develop them. And secondly, with the amount of capital that investors and manufacturers and motor dealers have got tied up in property, the previous solution of out with the old, in with the new is unlikely to be as attractive as trying to make the adapting existing facilities.
Okay, so you're a specialist in selling car dealerships. Have you seen any market reaction to what's going on from buyers or sellers? Have you got sellers who are getting nervous, so they want to get out? Have you got buyers who want to get in, or have you seen because it's been in the news quite a lot recently?
Yeah, I think it's a very astute question. There remains uncertainty in the economy overall, and therefore there is uncertainty in the delivery of these new products because we haven't got the new product. So I think there's also, as I was trying to rectify, a misconception that, for example, the recent decline in new car sales is anything but a cyclical issue relating to a short-term supply side issue. So I think it's important to convey, particularly to investors, that what we're looking at here is a short-term scenario. It's not a major structural change as perhaps might be happening in other property sectors with the influence of the internet. And that what we are is experiencing is a transition. But essentially, the car and the car dealership remains, as we've shown in one of the slides, central to the whole delivery of mobility services. So being an owner of that asset puts you at the very centre of future transportation and mobility services. So it's a very good time now for investors maybe to take advantage of some other investors' uncertainties or concerns, and to get in at a very good time in the market.
So I would say,
to finish, I'm sorry to interrupt. It's also really quite important to look at the brands. So we will look at the properties and we will look at the covenants of the tenants and the lease terms. But it's also very important to look at the brands, because unlike pretty much any other property investment medium, whilst the investor typically will not have a contract with the manufacturer, the dealer that they hold the lease from does. And so there is an indirect link to the manufacturer. And if that manufacturer is one of the leading exponents of the new technology, you can expect the future for that business to be secure. And there are leads for this. You can look at the monthly Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders new car sales and see whose market shares are increasing and who's not. And you can look at the twice yearly dealer attitude survey that's conducted by the National Franchise Dealer Association that tells you what the dealers think of the manufacturers. So, you know, at the moment, at the top of these lists, you'll see brands like Kia introducing, you know, new product, and you'll see resilient performance from brands like Mercedes.
Okay. Got an interesting question here from Damien, who says, do you think there will be a decline in the need for fuel station properties?
Yeah, I got to qualify this by saying my introduction was I only deal with franchised car dealerships. I don't actually deal with petrol filling stations, and my colleagues in the market will be very concerned about what I might say on that. However, there is a kind of quick answer to your question, which is that BP very recently acquired ChargeMaster, and ChargeMaster, together with a company called PodPoint, are one of the two principal providers of electric chargers. And at the moment, there are about 10,000 electric charging points in the UK. We sell over a 10-year average in excess of 2 to 2.25 million vehicles per annum. And I repeat, there's 37 million vehicles in circulation. And at the moment, about 5% of the new car market is alternatively fueled vehicles. Now, that is, if that becomes 25% in 3 years' time, that's 500,000 vehicles sold each year. And currently there are 10,000 charge points. So there's a need for urgent, massive improvements in the infrastructure of charging points. BP's acquisition of ChargeMaster is telling you that they are going to get into that market, and therefore the petrol filling station will also become the charging station. And as it will take, even the best will in the world, longer currently to charge a vehicle than it does to fuel it, 20 to 40 minutes, the petrol filling stations are likely to have increased dwell time.
Yes, you'll have a coffee shop and things like that.
And
it's interesting, isn't it?
And we can, if for Damien's question, if I would encourage more to look at the Norway example, because in Norway they have around about 60% electric vehicle take-up. Bear in mind, Norway has easy and cheap hydroelectricity to charge the vehicles, and the petrol stations in Norway still exist, but they fulfill different functions or extended functions.
Interesting. How's everyone getting on? Dale, I don't know if you have any questions, or Doug, or...
Yeah, I've got one for you, Bill.
Well, give me one moment. Let me just turn myself off here. Go.
Yeah, Bill, just going back to what you were saying earlier about sort of the government's drive to get people off into electric cars and off petrol and diesel cars. I don't understand. I saw it was actually, they must have known you were coming in today. I saw in the news today that the government's decided to scrap these subsidies for buying greener cars. I don't know if you saw, it was in the news this morning. And from next month, I read they're not going to give grants for hybrids, and they're cutting discounts on all electric cars. So on the one hand, the government's saying they want by, what was it, 2040, 2050, everyone to own electric cars, but which makes this decision to me by the government just ludicrous, isn't it? Or I don't know what your view is on that.
I haven't seen the report, but it's of no surprise to me at all. I think, first of all, overall, the government's attention is devoted elsewhere at the moment. And secondly, the UK motor industry does feel that government isn't giving it the attention and support that is required. The subsidy that you're talking about, very roughly, is typically £4,000 per vehicle. And electric cars are quite expensive. I would think typically between £30,000 and £40,000 for the cheaper end models. So the £4,000 subsidy is quite important in assisting that. But also, you mentioned about hybrids. The government's and in general socio-political views are to move away from hybrids and to move into pure electric. So it makes absolute sense that subsidies for hybrids would be particularly hit. The problem has been, as I said, about the supply side difficulties, which is that there aren't enough electric cars. And if you want to go and buy an electric car, you're going to have a 6 or 9 month waiting list. So the difficulty is that the regulation is coming in all the time ahead of where the market naturally is. Don't be concerned about the price, because as more models are produced, the prices will come down, and therefore the need for the subsidy is redundant in any event. And as the major manufacturers, so Tesla have had this field to themselves for a long time, but as the major manufacturers introduce new models, and I read a report recently that there are at least 40 new models planned now, but you can imagine by the time we get to 2021, 2023, there'll be many, many more models than that. Inevitably, the costs will come down and the subsidy will have been redundant. It's done its job.
Do you know something? With all this going on, it sort of makes you very nervous about wanting to buy a car, because it's changing so fast. You're more like to lease the car than buy a car.
Well, now, again, very quite poignant observation.
What can I say?
80 to 90% of new vehicles are sold on personal contract plans, and those will typically last for 2 to 3 years. So you're absolutely right. Why would you buy a car outright? Why wouldn't you buy a car on the personal contract plan? Which simply then means that the car that you buy today, you can change for a new car which is completely what you want, completely compliant in 2 or 3 years' time. And the finance costs, most manufacturers will be offering zero interest, are very, very compelling. So that's exactly the thing to do. I mean, I'm not offering personal finance advice.
Yes, well, if anybody wants to get, yes, what I say is that Bill knows all the deals. Knows right. So, Graham, do you have a question?
Yeah, I mean, what are alternative fuel vehicles? I mean, what are the other alternatives? And it's all focused on electric, but what are the other types of fuels that would be used for alternative cars?
Yeah, I'm not an engineer, Graham, but hydrogen was mentioned before. My recollection is either Honda or Toyota have been looking at hydrogen as a power source. And we can speculate as to whether reliance on battery could be replaced by other forms of power generation. I think the overwhelming issue is that the governments across the world want to reduce emissions, and so the need to be replacements for fossil fuel emissions, even though many of the manufacturers will maintain that they can produce extremely efficient and low emission vehicles, both from petrol and diesel.
Okay.
And I suspect, someone asked me this another time, I suspect that as time develops over the next decade or two, we will end up with a mix of combustion engine cars and electric and alternatively fueled vehicles, which would cover hydrogen.
Okay, good. Okay, shall we have a prop tech? Should we have a prop tech break and then come back to the car market in a moment? Because I thought the audience might be interested in watching something, and I'm going to explain something that happened this week, last week actually, last Friday. which I just think might be quite interesting. So this, let's just talk about this. Okay, so what you're watching now, everyone, is a recording of a property sale that occurred last Friday. And of course, this can be used to sell any property, be it commercial, car showroom investments, residential. So as you know, we're closely aligned with the click to purchase business where you can buy buildings online. And that business recently launched artificial intelligence auctioning. And the idea being that rather than having an auction run by an eBay style computer or run by an individual in real time, we decided to create an automation, and we decided to build onto the click to purchase system an automation where it was actually run by a bot, which is beyond manipulation, but the bidding experience is completely the same as if one were standing in an auction room, putting your hand up and bidding. And so what happened here, this was a building that was sold in Dublin, and interestingly, it was a residential property. It was put on the market for 250,000 euros by an agency called Allen and Jacobs, and the property went to the market at 250. And as you can see, Gabby was our auctioneer, and she encouraged bidders. She reduced the bid increment where necessary, and she took the bidding all the way to sale, which actually occurred at 345,000 euros. Now, the beauty of this sort of technology change, if I can suggest, is that the way people are bidding is an experience that they're used to, that's been tried and tested for many, many years, of course, for hundreds of years. So we're not changing in any way the way you bid for a property. It's not eBay style, which in my view is changing the way people bid for a property. So the experience for the bidder is the same. For the bidder, the seller, the agent, for everybody involved, because it's electronic, there's a full audit trail of activity. And at the end of the auction, what is unique, another unique feature of the click to purchase system, is that we create digital signatures on electronic contract notes, which then get recorded in the blockchain ledger. So we're the only business worldwide at the moment actively using the blockchain ledger for transactions. So as you can see, what we've managed to do is combine artificial intelligence with blockchain technology in selling property. So what was interesting up here is that this was going into the mainstream. This is a residential agent using the technology to sell a house. And I think this is a fundamental change for the whole industry. So we're very proud of this, actually. So I just thought I'd bring in a bit of prop tech for everyone, because there's no reason why every property in the country won't be sold online. It might be sold by private treaty, it might be sold by auction, it might be sold by tender. Click to purchase is just the first system that's actually doing it in real time with an artificial intelligence. So you've been talking about how you've got automation coming into the car industry. It's happening in our own industry right now. So if anybody wants to use click to purchase, you know where to come. As this is CPD, do you want to do a quick overview of how you value
Yeah, no,
I'll
give it my level best.
I always say the value is what someone will pay for it. So my stock answer to clients when they say, well, how much are we going to get? I say, I don't know, the market will determine. But shall we try? Shall I get an appropriate?
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, thank you for putting this up. I think there's one real purpose behind this, which is that I would like to convey that whilst car dealerships are often assessed on the basis of their rent per square foot, and if you look at this slide here, which is just a typical dealership, you'll see at the bottom right hand corner there's a £12.37 figure. The point of putting this slide up is that the £12.37 figure is the result of a calculation rather than the starting point of a calculation. So the challenge sometimes for car dealerships is dependent upon the configuration of the space. You could conceivably have a building of the same size on the same site area with one identical one next door having a different valuation. And that's what needs a little bit of explaining. So as you can see here from this graph, you've got the various constituent parts of a dealership set out. So a showroom will be considered very similar to a retail unit. You'll have some offices which will have some relationship perhaps to office rents in the area. And then crucially, you'll have the workshop and ancillary parts that will have some relationship to industrial rents. So what you're looking at doing is breaking the property down. And then the thing that's often overlooked, and this example demonstrates it, is the value that's apportioned to the car parking. So in other words, it's quite possible that the external areas could have a value of a third or more of the overall rental and therefore capital value. So it's just important to understand with car dealerships that you assemble the valuation through looking at the value of the constituent parts rather than just simply the application of an overall rent.
Yeah, but do valuers, property people break it down, but do the occupiers actually go through it like this? Do the occupier just say, actually, I can afford 220,000 for this unit?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. Of course, it is all about affordability for an occupier. And what we will find in our world is that different franchises, so the prestige brands, can pay more for this, or perhaps the same property, than either one of the volume brands, say Ford, or one of the smaller niche or Japanese brands like Toyota or Nissan. So yes, it is all about affordability. The challenge that we must wrestle with in our world is that affordability is not part of the valuation guidance.
Yeah. Okay. And there's an idea.
Yeah, I thought what I'd do is just put together, people ask the sort of yields, and we track all of this data. We've got about 7,500 records for about 4,500 properties across the UK, car dealership properties. So we keep a regular tracking of movements in yields and values. So this is just a slide that is showing where the average values are. So the top table is all car dealerships, what the average yield is, which has not moved a great deal, but this year is proving to still be quite keen. And then we've shown a separate table for the 5 to 10 year unexpired lease. This is often the area in which the institutional investor is looking to review the position and is an opportunity for sort of private investors. And then we've shown the highest prime yield, which would sit alongside any form of alternative RPI-based investment. A 20-year lease with RPI, and you can see that's very keen.
You know what's interesting, actually, the yields haven't really moved in the last few years. It's been pretty static.
Yeah, I mean, the big yield movements will have been probably from 2011 to 2013. And then, as you say, we will have seen a relative plateauing.
Yeah. Okay. So, Bill, I think that's really interesting. I think unless anyone's got any more questions, I think.
Can I ask a question about lease lengths?
Yeah, of course. Go.
Yeah, I'm just interested if where the market outlook is on lease lengths on a new letting on a new site. What could the expectation be of the lease length that an occupier would sign? Are you seeing these lease lengths coming in, or is there pressure to take breaks into the leases because of the cyclical restructuring that's going on? And what's your outlook for that over the short to medium term?
For new builds, we would still expect to see 15 to 20 year contractual obligation. And in the main, most dealers would be happy to do that because they would accept that building is future proofed and flexible. The buildings are quite expensive to build, so perhaps the most area of activity at the moment is in new Jaguar Land Rover dealerships, and you can expect the construction costs for one of those to be £6 to £8 million. So all up together with land and buildings, a value of £8 to £12 million overall is not unreasonable. I think if you're reletting an existing building, you first need to consider its suitability for the intended occupier and whether they've got to make alterations. And as Neil was referring to earlier, you've got a position whereby is it affordable for that particular brand? And it may be what we've seen, and this is the best example, and this has been seen across the country from Scotland down to the southwest. One of the most popular occupiers for former franchise car dealerships is a used car supermarket. And we're seeing typically a rental adjustment of around about 20% discount from what the franchise dealership was paying to what the used car supermarket is paying on a reletting. Nothing much in the way of inducements, maybe some form of step rent, maybe a 3 or 6 month rent free or concession there, but nothing too significant.
Okay. So the last, I think that really wraps it up. We've done a bit of prop tech. We've done a bit of car, well, a lot of car dealerships, which actually does. I find it so interesting because I'm so interested in the whole prop tech world, and I think that probably wraps it up for today. We've been on for nearly an hour. Thank you for questions, and I think that's probably it. Everyone, anyone, any more questions? I think we're done for today. Remember, oh, actually, just to remind everybody, a couple of things as we finish off, which you might find quite interesting. Oh, let me just share the right slide with everybody. So just for those who are interested, this is us. Remember, this is Vielle, and you'll find this infographic now on our website, which does show what we do as a business. And as you can see, we are quite technology driven. Whilst we are very into marketing, we also are very interested in the world of blockchain and the world of artificial intelligence, etc. And the side business is the click to purchase business, which is here, as you can see. So if anybody wants to talk about click to purchase or blockchain, please let me know. Oh, and the last thing, actually, let me just show you what you might find interesting. I showed you earlier the property which got sold in Ireland. This actually is the digital contract note, which was generated immediately the auction completed. And you can see here these hashes. These are hash digital signatures, and this is what makes the whole thing legally binding. If anybody wants to learn more, by all means give me a shout and I will explain. But I don't think today is necessarily the right place to go into this in too much detail. So everyone, that's it. Bill, thank you very much. I hope that was great. If anybody wants to sell an investment, you come to me. If anybody wants it valued, you go to Bill. All right. You can offer it. You can go to Doug and Graham as well. And you can also use Dale, but anyway. But if anybody wants something if anybody wants some specialist advice about car showrooms, go to Bill. Oh, where can you get the cheapest car? Which manufacturer is really struggling?
Oh, I couldn't possibly say.
I tell you what. Talking about diesels, I bought a diesel car the other year. You know, I'm still paying the thing off. I don't think I'll ever get my money back, will I? Okay, so Bill, thank you very much. That was really interesting. Great. And also, if anybody wants an introduction to Bill, please come on to us. We'll be delighted to refer you in all seriousness. So thanks very much, Bill. Dale, well done. Thank you very much. Doug, great.
Thank you.
Learn. CPD. Oh, you know, CPD. Yeah, if anyone wants to, Graham, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll tell you what. Okay, CPD question. What year on that did we show on the graph? At what point is our alternative vehicle sales meeting old-fashioned car sales there? Okay, so if anyone answers that, then get the CPD certificate. So that's it, guys. Thank you very much. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
All the best. Thanks very much. Bye.